Hello, AP Biology students. Welcome to Unit 1, Chemistry of Life. It's one of the smaller units, but it provides a foundation for all the other ones. So let's dive right in. Just like all my videos, this is free. It's not meant to be used for any money purposes. It's just to help students. This video will cover 1.1 and 1.2. So we're going to go over water and hydrogen bonding, and then how that leads to emergent properties for life, and then also the elements of life. When you do videos and when you do notes and when you go through material, I encourage you to make some type of concept map or something that you can refer back to get that big picture. Think about what am I trying to see overall, and that way you don't get lost in small details. And here's an example of my concept map for Unit 1. A little hard to read, I know. All right, let's dive into water and hydrogen bonding. Let's look at that learning objective. It tells us that we need to explain how the properties of water that result from its polarity and hydrogen bonding affect its biological function. Well, to do that, we have to understand why is water a polar molecule, what is hydrogen bonding, and then we can get to the rest. So let's do it. Okay, everything is made of matter, and matter is made of atoms. An element is one type of atom. So I'm sure your teacher and I will here at TASM have you look at a periodic table. Here we have some examples of two elements, and these are the ones that make up water, right? You know that water is H2O. So hydrogen is one proton and one electron. The proton is in the middle. It is positively charged. The electron is in an orbital around it. Oxygen has 8 protons and 8 neutrons. Neutrons have no charge. Protons have a positive charge, and electrons have a negative charge. The net overall charge for each of these atoms is neutral, right? It has a proton and electron. Here it has 8 protons and 8 electrons. Hopefully you can see that oxygen is going to be bigger, right? It has more protons and neutrons and more electrons around it. So here we can learn the concept of an emergent property. An emergent property means the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And the way I think about this is like a football team or a soccer team. One person can only do so much out on the pitch. But you add 2, you add 3, you add 4, you can begin passing the ball, you can begin forming plays, you can set up different arrangements that can really move the ball around and do different things on the pitch. Same thing for atoms. One atom by itself can only do so much. If you combine 2 or more different types of atoms, you get a compound, such as H2O. Notice how that is 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen, so that makes a compound. Or carbon dioxide, right? And so here would be 1 carbon and 2 oxygens. That would make a compound. A molecule is just 2 or more atoms, and that can be the same type, like O2, oxygen bonds to self. It's a diatomic molecule. You will often hear people use compounds and molecules to mean the same thing. And for us, it's not a big deal, but all compounds are molecules, but not all molecules are compounds. Technically, O2 is not a compound because it's only 2 of the same atoms. But the big idea here is that when atoms start bonding together, they can do more than they could by themselves. So let's get back to water. Water, we know, is going to be 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. This is called a Bohr model, and it shows energy levels, and it shows where the electrons are situated around in an element. So notice how hydrogen has 1 electron in this orbital. This orbital can hold up to 2 electrons, the first one. And so notice how oxygen has 2 electrons in that orbital. The second orbital can hold 8. So here it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They have an attraction, or oxygen will have an attraction to get 2 more electrons to fulfill the need for 8 in its outer shell. And that's called valence electrons. We call that the octet rule. Here's just another example of it. So the first 2 elements, hydrogen and helium on the periodic table. Notice how hydrogen is in group 1. It has 1 electron. Helium is in group 18. These are going to be stable. These have filled outer valence electron shells. Helium has 2. And since this level can just hold 2, helium is non-reactive. Here, lithium has 2 in that first orbital, and then it only has 1 in the outer orbital. So it needs 7 more to have a stable outer orbital, or it would need to give up that 1 electron. Carbon, which is the basis of most molecules for our course, has 4 in the second orbital. And so it can form bonds with lots of other elements. You can think about it as someone that can hang out with lots of different groups. So let's get back to water. That's what the objective was learning about. And so we have H2O. Here we can look at this Bohr model here, and we can see that by sharing an electron between this hydrogen and an oxygen, between this hydrogen and this the same oxygen, now this orbital is fulfilled. There will be 2 electrons in the first orbital for hydrogen, and there will be 8 electrons in the second orbital for oxygen, and as well as 2 here for this hydrogen. So all the elements have fulfilled what they need to get in their different orbitals. Remember, the first one needs 2, second one needs 8. And so I'm trying to not use words like happy or want, etc., because these are not, we don't need to anthropomorphize molecules. We just say that they have an attraction for it. So the oxygen and the hydrogens are sharing these electrons. When the electrons are shared between atoms to form a compound, we call that a covalent bond. And I just remember that the C in covalent for couple. The octet rule is fulfilled here for oxygen. Now this sharing here is not even. This molecule is going to be polar. There will be an uneven distribution of charge throughout the molecule. Oxygen is a relatively more electronegative element. Those elements that are in the upper right-hand corner of the periodic table tend to be more electronegative. It has a stronger pull for these electrons to be near it because it has 8 protons compared to 1 here for hydrogen. So what does this mean? It means that if you were to take a snapshot in time, just like a quick picture for TikTok, the electrons will be around the oxygen more often than they would be around the hydrogens. So the oxygen is negative, the hydrogens are positive in this molecule. This is a polar covalent bond, and it's going to be a polar molecule. Now, that in and of itself leads to the polarity of water. The polarity of water leads to hydrogen bonding. Remember that the oxygen is relatively negative, the H's are relatively positive. You can call them dipoles. And so here, if the H is relatively positive, the oxygen is relatively negative, opposites attract, just like north and south on a magnet. This positive hydrogen is attracted to this negative oxygen. This positive hydrogen is attracted to this negative oxygen. This is called intermolecular forces, and this is called hydrogen bonding. Inter means between molecules. So between molecules of water, and look, now I'm doing it, molecules and compounds, just using them interchangeably. But in between these molecules exist attractive forces. The sharing of electrons within the molecule, the within bonding that's going on here, that's a covalent bond between the H and the O right here that I'm highlighting. Between the 2 water molecules is a hydrogen bond. Hydrogen bonds are weaker than covalent bonds. They can be broken and reformed all the time. But they're very important, and they're very, very important in biology. Each water molecule here can form hydrogen bonds with up to 4 other water molecules. I like to model it now with a little kit that I have. So here are some water molecules. You can see that it's going to be H2O, so the white ones are going to be hydrogens. The red one's going to be oxygen on this. And notice how the white will form it is attracted to the negative oxygen there. And so it can bond with up to 4 other water molecules. So that central one's bonded to 4. These bonds can be constantly broken and reformed. And they give water quite the emergent properties. Now, if you look at this molecule down here, these hydrogens will not form hydrogen bonds because they have an equal sharing of electrons. They are non-polar. That would be like an oil or a fat. All right. The big ideas, if you haven't looked at those yet, the big idea number 4 for AP Biology is going to be interactions of systems. And so this is a great example of emergent properties coming from interactions between systems. And so here, once again, my soccer team analogy, or my football team analogy, that together they can do so much more than one person could do on their own. And so here are the emergent properties that result from hydrogen bonding: cohesion, adhesion, capillary action, the ability of water to store lots of heat, the fact that water is less dense as a solid than as a liquid, so that ice floats on top of a lake or ice floats on top of the ocean. Water is a solvent and helps to dissolve things. And so let's dive into each one a little more closely. Okay, water. Water molecules are attracted to one another by hydrogen bonding, as we just went over. So if I have a drop of water here on my finger, the water molecules themselves are bonding to each other, the O's and the H's, and it's also bonded to my finger, and that's called adhesion. It's going to be attracted to other polar molecules. So cohesion, I just remember C for couple, that water likes to bond to each other, and then adhesion is attracted to other polar substances. This is really important because it can lead to transpiration in plants. And so here would be a leaf model that I have. And so water is going to start at the ground level, and it's going to go up the xylem in plants, because at the top, water will evaporate out this hole called a stomata. It's usually on the bottom of a leaf. It'll evaporate out the stomata and pull the next water molecule up, right? It's connected to it. They're cohering together, and then it's also adhering to the walls of the xylem. This lets water go way up a tree and not have to cost the tree any energy. It is not actively transported. It is able to move via transpiration. You can also see this with a small capillary tube if you put it into a beaker of water. All right, a couple other more properties of water that are important. If the solid form of water, ice, as you see over here, is going to be frozen in place as a lattice structure of hydrogen bonds, that's going to have relatively more volume than the liquid phase where they're constantly breaking and reforming. If density is mass divided by volume, because ice has a bigger volume due to the frozen hydrogen bonds here in a lattice structure compared to them constantly breaking and reforming, ice will be less dense than water. Most substances in their solid form are more dense than their liquid form. But this lets ice float on top of water. Which, think about it. If you had a lake and if it froze from the bottom up, then the water on top would constantly be in contact with cold air and the whole lake would freeze over quickly. But because the ice is on top, it actually helps to insulate the water below and it keeps life alive in that lake. The same thing in our oceans. So that's one, that was bullet point 3 here, that the solid ice is less dense than liquid water. That helps to contribute to life. Water also contributes to life because it takes more energy to heat water up. You have to break all those hydrogen bonds. So today it is, my goodness, it is hot. It's like 44 degrees Celsius here in Muscat, Oman. And so if I go outside, I don't immediately start boiling in my body because it takes a while to heat up the water inside of there. This is good for me because enzymes and many of the items in my body tend to work best at 37 degrees Celsius. It also helps to cool us down and promote homeostasis. So as I sweat, the highest energy molecules evaporate first. It helps to cool me down. It is also a universal solvent, so it can dissolve ionic bonds. Here would be salt, so NaCl. So the blue one is sodium and the green one is chlorine. And so here, if you put them in the water, because chlorine is negatively charged, it will get surrounded by all the positive hydrogens on water molecules. And because sodium is going to be positively charged, it's going to be surrounded by all the negative oxygens in water, like this. And it helps to pull apart this bond. If you didn't know what an ionic bond is, an ionic bond is a bond that's formed between two oppositely charged ions, a cation and an anion. I just remember a happy kitty cat and a negative anion. So here, the Na, the sodium, it has had one electron in its outer valence shell. It gave it up to chlorine. This is not sharing. This is not covalent. It's ionic when there's a transfer of that charge. Here's the capillary tube. I have a couple of these on order, so I'll have them next year for us. Water. Here is hydrogen bonding. Oh, this also can lead to surface tension, right? The molecules at the top of the water are going to be attracted to each other, and they provide enough of a force here that can hold up certain insects. It can't hold us up, right? We would drop right through it. But all the water molecules, you can think about it. Let me show you here with this model, are going to be bonded to each other at the top of the water, and it just provides a strong enough to hold up that water striding insect. All right, let's jump into 1.2, the elements of life. So that was our first topic in AP Biology. I hope you enjoyed learning about water, polarity, hydrogen bonding, and then the properties that exist from it that help promote life. This one's pretty quick. You just need to remember sponge. And so that's sulfur, phosphorus, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, and hydrogen. There's more elements that are required for life. There are many elements that are used with enzymes that are important, but these are the ones that we're going to kind of focus on here. All right, so most molecules are composed of rings or chains of carbon bonded to hydrogen, oxygen, and or nitrogen. And these are all covalent bonds that we're dealing with here. And so there's really 4 macromolecules that you're going to have to learn about: carbs, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. These macromolecules can be combined together to make organelles, right, within a cell, and those organelles can then give a cell the emergent property of life. So if you've done your reading, you might notice already, or if you're doing this in place of the reading the videos, let's go over what's inside of carbohydrates. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Lipids are going to have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen as well. And those that are in phospholipids, which are the bilayer of a cell, will have phosphorus, but mainly C, H, and O. Proteins will have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen in them. It's because it's made of an amino acid. The amine group has nitrogen in it. And proteins will also have a little bit of sulfur, because in 2 amino acids, cysteine and methionine, there's sulfur in the R group. Nucleic acids have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. By knowing the differences between these, Hershey and Chase were able to devise an experiment that showed that DNA is the genetic material that you can learn about in Unit 6. So here's just some examples. Here would be a monomer of a carbohydrate. So this is glucose. I look at it, I see a bunch of C's, I see H's, I see O's. It's in the formula of C6H12O6, a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. Here I look at lipids. So this would be saturated and unsaturated fats. And I see C's, H's, and O's. So this is a good moment to just realize that the structure of a molecule leads to its function. Notice how both lipids and carbohydrates have C, H, and O in them. Lipids have relatively more carbons and hydrogens in them, which leads to their function of being energy storage molecule or being the phospholipid bilayer. Here is amino acid. So a protein is many, many amino acids put together or bonded together. It's going to start with an amino group, which has H's and N's. It has a central carbon. It has a hydrogen off of it. And then this R group can be different for the 20 amino acids. It is different for each amino acid. And then it has a carboxyl group. This is why it's called an acid. This H plus can be donated. The R group here, here's an example of one. Here's the nitrogen side, the amine group. Here's the carboxyl group. And here would be the R group. This one has sulfur in it, cysteine, and so does this one, methionine. And this is why we also said it's sulfurs in proteins as well. The important thing, though, to remember is CHO and then the addition of N. So if a question on an AP test said we analyzed the elements in this molecule and had nitrogen in it, well, it can't be a carbohydrate and it can't be a lipid. it could be a protein or it could be a nucleic acid, you then need some more information as well. Here's DNA. So this would be a nucleotide, and this would be the backbone of your DNA, and it's made of a phosphate, a sugar, and a nitrogenous base. So here we have nitrogen, we have the carbons, the oxygens, and the hydrogens, and we also have phosphorus. I noticed that I picked this diagram out and it doesn't have any C's on it. Wherever there isn't an element written and it has a vertex, a carbon is understood to be there. So if you were given a question and it said it has phosphorus in it as well and nitrogen, then you would know it had to be a nucleic acid because proteins don't have phosphorus in them. All right. Thanks for watching. Make sure you try practice problems, right? It's going to do no good to just watch this. You need to do practice problems. You can email me with any questions that you have, maybe work on building models and have some fun. This is a Wadi we went to during Eid. It was awesome. Can't wait to see you. Peace out.